Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I am Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, the radio flagship home of the Cowboys, joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105.3 The Fan. And he is also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. And Brian, something really good came out of our last show.
What was that, Robert?
I noticed the Merry Christmas sign in my living room, and
it's no longer there.
It's not there anymore. It's been replaced. So, silver linings, Brian. We've got this pretty big game coming up here for the Cowboys against the 49ers on Sunday. And it's funny, Brian, I don't know if you feel this way. So many of the people, even the longest tenured employees at the Cowboys in general, are people who got here a few years after the last Super Bowl. So there's so many people here who have never seen an NFC title game. There are so many people here who got their first road playoff victory this past weekend. But Christy Scales is one. She had never seen a road playoff victory. There were people in PR who have been here for forever. Chris Beam, your buddy at DallasCowboys.com, who does the video stuff. So a lot of people who had never experienced this, Nick Eatman, bunch of different folks. It feels like the general sense I get, and I don't know if you agree with this, Brian, it almost feels like there's an inability to even even if you think Dallas can win, there's an inability to even conceive the season continuing after this weekend. Like that just seems like a dream. That seems like something that's not even real. Like it feels like for people who have covered this team for a long time or been around this team that, man, they've got a legitimate shot to go on. And you can't even put yourself in that headspace yet. It's like saying, well, what do you think? What do you think Atlantis is like? Like, I don't know. That sounds like a made-up place to me. That doesn't even sound real. So I don't know if you feel that way, Brian. Is that the sense you've gotten this week, just from listeners and stuff on your own show? That it feels, even people who think they're going to win, it doesn't even feel like anything they can connect to as a reality.
Yeah, that's. It's a really in-depth question and thought that you just gave. Because it was just amazing to me. And as we got ready for the Tampa game, and they kept saying that Tom Brady has just as many playoff wins as the Dallas Cowboys. And you're thinking, Cowboys been around, 62, 63 years. Mm-hmm. Tom Brady's been in the league, 21, 22 years. And you're just thinking of like, God, has it been that long since – this team's had any type of playoff success. So, but I think this year you can allow yourself to dream a little bit. When you don't have, when you don't have an Aaron Rodgers in this tournament anymore, or, really never, he didn't get in, but now you don't have Tom Brady anymore. You really, you're going to have to beat Brock Purdy and either Jalen Hurts, who's playing very well, or Daniel Jones to get to the Super Bowl. And that's why I think that people are. I think they're enthusiastic. The win against Brady, I think it removed a lot of demons. I asked Stephen Jones this question today on Friday. We're taping this, and we have Stephen on our show every Friday afternoon. And I asked him, I saw you hug your dad like a big time embrace at the end of that game. And I go, was that just the emotion of the moment? And he answered the question. He goes, listen, Jerry's been very, very upfront about this. He doesn't know how many more of these he has. And for you to go on the road and since for 30 years, Jerry was in his 50s. Last time they got a victory on the road, and now he's in his 80s, and that just it shows you how difficult this could be, these playoff games. And Steven said it meant a lot to him to win. It meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to the organization, and I just feel like this fan base, we've all had our hearts ripped out before. We've all had our hearts ripped out with playoff losses and stuff. San Francisco is an excellent team. They are an excellent team. And this is going to be as tough of a game. We've seen games before where sometimes the divisional matchup is more difficult than what the championship matchup. And I don't mean with respect to Philadelphia or the Giants. I mean, I'd love to see the Giants win. I would love to see the Giants win on Saturday, just so the Cowboys know that if they go out there and take care of business and don't turn the ball over and tackle well, that they got a shot to host the Giants in the NFC Championship game. That's what's ahead of everybody right now, So it's one of those things where you get emotional thinking about being in the playoffs, but even more emotional when you win these games, because it does keep that dream alive. That, like I say, the last time the Cowboys won the Super Bowl was 1995. Our team at Green Bay won it in 96. That seems like so long ago to me right now. I mean, it just seems like forever that I can imagine what Cowboy fans feel like right now. And you know what? You're allowed to dream a little bit. You're allowed to dream. Go out there and play like you did against Tampa, and you got a good shot at knocking these 49ers off and getting a chance at the NFC Championship game.
Two more just kind of general feel questions for you before we go into the 49ers themselves. First one, you mentioned there that that last Cowboys Super Bowl team beat a Green Bay Packers team that you were part of.
Yeah.
Could you ever have envisioned at that time, if somebody would have told you at the end of that game, when I'm sure there was a lot of pain there in your locker room, if somebody told you, hey, Brian, 27 years from now, this organization will have not even been back to this championship game.
I would have never believed it, Bobby. I would have never, ever, ever believed it. But I felt like when we were in Green Bay, the following year they had a draft. There was a draft that the Cowboys had such great personnel, and they had a draft that just wasn't really up to snuff. And you kind of felt like, well, maybe things are changing here. Maybe the personnel is changing. I caught, when I came to Dallas in 99, I caught the tail end of Daryl Johnston, Emmitt Smith, Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin. I caught the end of that. That was towards the end for those guys. And so that part of it was like, man, when those guys, when it hit the wall, it hit the wall. It hit the wall a ton. And but if you would have told me 27 years later, I would have said this organization would have probably had one or two or maybe even three more Super Bowl victories to their credit.
And then the second one, we're gonna just selfishly, how cool would it be for you to get a Giants victory and a Cowboys victory, knowing that like next week you could be out there at the Miller Lite Plaza, being involved in the execution of the first NFC Championship game day in Dallas since you lost with the Packers in '95.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, it's tough when you're part of these teams and you fight really all year, and you're like, and you don't make it, or you don't get there. That's a very, very difficult thing that you have to deal with. But yeah, I mean, I'll just say this with the Cowboys, those games and stuff. I mean, playing Dallas, we had San Francisco's number, but we never did have Dallas's number. That was clear. Like I told the story I think before, but if you haven't heard it, I just remember we won a game out in Candlestick and playing a championship game in Dallas. And it was like the fans, I mean, like Reggie White sitting in his locker thinking about having to play against Eric Williams. Everybody was excited about, getting a chance to play Dallas. And and Reggie White's like, man, I have to play Eric Williams. And, that right there was, when I saw him down, I'm thinking like, oh, well, it's probably won't be pretty good for us going forward. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, this is a unique opportunity here for the Cowboys. I gotta say, it's pretty cool to look at the makeup right now of the NFC. It's a very classic look in these playoffs to have the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Eagles. It feels like 90s football again, early 90s into middle 90s. You're just missing the Packers really
Yeah.
for being a collection of the 90s elite. So with that said, the Cowboys head into I almost called it Candlestick. The Cowboys head into Levi's this weekend. And Brian, what is your big overriding theme you're looking at heading into this game of like, hey, this needs to happen. The Cowboys need to make this happen.
Bobby, there's a couple of things. I think this game is going to hinge in two areas. I think it's going to hinge in number one, how well you're able to block their front. And number two is how well you tackle on defense in this game. If either one of those or both of those are poor, Dallas will lose this football game. There's no question in my mind. If you don't find a way, and you're not going to be able to control this front the whole entire game, but if it turns into they just kind of have their way with you, then it's going to be a problem. You've got to be able to move the ball. You've got to be able to take advantage of the things that can happen in the secondary. Teams that have been able to move the ball in the 49ers have found a way to block the front and then, make plays in the passing game. And blocking Bosa and this crew is not going to be easy, but you have to find a way to make it work. And on the second side, the flip side of that is the tackling. This is a team that the offense is built on, run after catch. It's built on toughness. It's built on attacking you. It's built on putting you in bad spots. They are going to test how physical you're going to be with Kittle, with Juszczyk, with Deebo Samuel, with Brandon Ayuk. They're going to test you with how this offensive line with Trent Williams. They're going to test you. So if you're the Cowboys, the old saying is bring the big boy pants, and you better bring the big boy pants when you're playing on Sunday, because if you don't, this team will embarrass you with this running right through you and making it very, very difficult on you as well.
You talk about the physicality of the game. Obviously, something that was something they were severely lacking last year in the game against San Francisco, like an ability to match that. I think they've improved in that area a little bit. I still don't think they're top of the league in terms of being a physical blue collar football team. So Brian, as they enter this game, even though they've closed the gap maybe a little bit, who do you think on the defensive side of the ball? Like, hey, I need a tough, physical, strong football game from this guy on the defensive side. If I can get it just from this one guy, knowing that he can approach this game with physicality and toughness, I feel better already about how the defense is going to play.
I think it's Leighton Vander Esch. In these games where teams are interested in playing power football, Leighton Vander Esch comes up aces. And so with, this 49er team went out, they got Christian McCaffrey, who is outstanding at his job. He does so many things well for the 49ers. The stuff that you envisioned him doing when he was with Carolina. But this coach has figured out things about him and unlocked him in a lot of different ways, much like David Shaw did when he was at Stanford with Christian McCaffrey. But if you ask me, the really easy answer would be, okay, well, it's got to be Micah Parsons. Well, yeah, but Micah's going to play well. But Leighton Vander Esch to me means so much to this Cowboys defense, and how his ability to, he's when the hole opens up and he's there, it's a 3-yard gain. It's not a 18-yard gain or a 20-yard gain. His ability to tackle, be at the point of attack, I think will be huge. They need him. They need him. They need Donovan Wilson. They need Jaron Kearse. I was talking to people today. Kearse is going to play in this football game. They're going to need those safeties and Van Der Esch to be American heroes in this game.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that. I think we referenced that earlier this week that J-Ron Kearse is going to play. Like the way he's talked about San Francisco, the way he's talked about this team, the leader that he is on this team, he wasn't going to miss this game. Like
no,
he'd have to be like missing a limb to miss the game. But that also doesn't mean that he's not going to be banged up. He's going to play.
Yeah.
He's probably going to be hurting. He's not going to be 100%. But Brian, would you feel better about, I don't know, let's say 80% of J-Ron Kearse compared to whoever might get those snaps in his place, Mukuamu, Bell, whoever?
Yeah, I mean, Mukuamu has done, he's stepped in and really has done a nice job. I mean, last week it was super impressive how, that he was able to kind of carry some of the things that people noticed about him in training camp, some of the things we noticed about him during the season. But, not to the level. I mean, everybody's like, wow, this is Dan Quinn's ace in the hole, Israel Mukuamu. All right, good job there. But I think with Kearse, the human spirit and the human will to accomplish, I think is great. And I think it's in Kearse. I think he's one of those guys that Dan Quinn was right about him when he went out early in the season. It's like, man, this guy's our quarterback. Now, the defense held it together and all that, and, was played well, throughout, but not having him in there, there's so many things that he does. Heck, he could have had probably 2-3 interceptions the other day in that game. He had the one in the end zone being in the right spot, had one in the middle of the field, a couple other ones maybe he could have had, but he's just a guy that's the right place, right time. He's toughness. He's kind of the glue, like in the back end with him and Van Der Esch and those guys, that kind of keep this thing going the right direction.
I'm going to make a potentially dangerous comparison for J-Ron Kearse, and you tell me if it's a dumb comparison. Not quite to the level, but I think it's a similar impact at this point for me. I think not having J-Ron Kearse feels similar to those times in the past when it was like you don't have Sean Lee.
Yeah.
Like, I think you're missing so much in terms of intangibles and just IQ and the way he makes everybody else better. Kearse has reached close to like Sean Lee levels when he's absent.
There's no question. He has come in there and, last year he, not many people ever believed. I think George Edwards, who had him in Minnesota, believed. J-Ron Kearse was a special teams guy. That's really.
I thought he'd get cut. I thought he was going to get cut.
Yeah, it's the long list of these Cowboy veteran safety guys that nobody really wants, and then all of a sudden you spent $1 million and they're gone, kind of a thing. But this guy is proven throughout. I mean, it's hard to play without him, and it's really hard to play without Van Der Esch. Both those guys are outstanding.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, Brian, let's continue to dive into this game and look at some different angles of this. You asked me this question on the radio earlier. You asked me, who am I more concerned about, Nick Bosa or Christian McCaffrey? And for me, it was Christian McCaffrey. I just think that he can deflate this team in a number of different ways. He can hurt them in a number of different ways and impact it on a stronger snap-to-snap basis. So now that we're here on the podcast, I'm going to turn the question around to you, Brian. Who are you more concerned about, Christian McCaffrey or Nick Bosa?
But you're going to stick with your answer, though?
Yes, I'm sticking with Christian McCaffrey. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's McCaffrey, too. I really, really do. I think the things that he could do, he's such a weapon in the backfield. Hand it to him, toss it to him, throw it to him, move him out wide. I mean, David Shaw, his coach at Stanford, will tell you when he came out of the draft, David Shaw was saying, it's one of the best receivers in the draft. And you're like, but coach, he plays running back. No, I'm just telling you, he's one of the best receivers in the draft. He's that kind of a player. So
his dad was a pretty good receiver.
Dad was really good. Dad was a really, really good player. So, mom was a very talented soccer player too at Stanford. So, I mean, he's got some really good genes in his family that way. But Yeah, I think with Nick Bosa, can they find a way to block him one-on-one? Are they going to be able to chip him? I mean, the last time they played a Bosa was in week 2 last year, I think, when the Chargers and the Cowboys were involved. Bosa was he's one
They
of
play.
those
I mean,
guys.
they played Nick in the playoffs, but yeah,
Yeah, but okay, but yeah, but like I said,
yeah,
you're absolutely right. They played Nick
yeah.
last year, but another Bosa, his brother, and I just going back to it was the first start for Terrence Steele, and we were all kind
Mhm.
of worried about Terrence Steele getting eaten alive out there, but it was him one on one. It was some chip blocks. It was tight ends. They play in that wide 9 alignment. You get the guy way, way, way to the outside there, and then and so the further you can remove him from the ball, the better chance you have of getting the ball out before he gets home. So I wouldn't be surprised if they move him by alignment, get him make him have to play a little bit wider and then rush the passer. But his brother, like I say, they chipped him, they double teamed him, they single blocked him. I could see the same thing happening, but man, I just keep thinking about, keep thinking about what McCaffrey can do, and he could take it the house from anywhere on the field. That's how capable a player he is.
You mentioned they're chipping with the tight ends, and this is more kind of a generalized question, I guess. We gave a lot of praise, rightfully so, still early on to this tight end group, like how they played in the passing game. When they would stay in and block in pass protection, when they would block on runs. I think we both talked about Dalton Schultz. I think has become a pretty good run blocker, to be honest, especially compared to where he had been in the past. But do you feel like overall the tight ends group, maybe over the last few weeks of the season, was not blocking up to the standard they had set earlier in the year?
I think there was some issues there. I don't think they were as clean with Tyron Smith being there. I think there was some really good understanding of how, and I think Zach Martin dealt with the same thing. Like when you get used to playing next to a guy and his steps, hand placement, head placement, body position, all these things, I think Martin understood who was where, and he understood how Steele's mannerisms were and how he played. I think last week was the first time that we'd seen Tyron Smith have the type of game where there was a little bit better fit and a little bit better understanding of where he needed to be. Now, saying that, he's also got tight ends on the other side, that are getting used to how he blocks and stuff like that. So the scoop blocks, the reach blocks, the blocks they crack toss, those are things I think that, that was going to take a little time. I think it took a little bit longer than we even thought with Tyron Smith over there. But, this game could very well hinge on some other things. I know the two things I talked about earlier, but with Bill Vinovich as the official and it's an all-star crew, I have a feeling that Bill Vinovich is going to tell his crew, listen, if it's a flag or you see it, throw it. If you don't see it, don't throw it, kind of a thing. So I think Bill Vinovich is going to let this crew or these teams play a little bit. That probably is an advantage to the Cowboys because I think the Cowboys are going to have to hold the the San Francisco offensive linemen or defensive linemen more this game than maybe vice versa. And so that I think kind of plays in the Cowboys' favor if the officials let them, in fact, let the players decide this game. And that includes the tight ends because some of the holding calls we've been getting to see are from like Dalton Schultz and things like that.
How are you trying to attack Brock Purdy in this game? What's the approach here to rattle him? Because nobody's really been able to do it yet. He's been incredibly poised. The Shanahan system really just asks for good decision making, minimizing mistakes. You talk about the yards after catch. The fact that he's got an insane yards per attempt, but his intended air yards is actually 0.1 below what Jimmy Garoppolo was. So it's about ball placement. It's about accuracy. It's about, not turning the ball over. And he's done those things. So how do they disrupt that?
Yeah, the ball's probably going to come out quick because of all the underneath stuff, the crossing routes and things like that. If they get in bunch formations and they get real tight to the tackles, I'm thinking about bringing slot blitzes. I'm thinking about bringing blitzes of that he might not. Now, they're going to set protection off where Micah Parsons is.
Yeah.
I might consider putting Micah Parsons and Tank on the same side of the field, and then trying to kind of see if you could get something home from that. I'm also thinking about that, whether it's Curse, whether it's Wilson, whether it's Bland, I'm thinking about slot blitzing, not from depth or from width, but if it's tight formation stuff and you can quickly get there and hit him, you've got to get there before he gets the ball out. So if you can get some shots from the backside there, hit him a couple of times, make him have to think, okay, if I'm looking at this defense, okay, I know where Micah Parsons is. Okay, I see Tank, but I know I'm taking care of. But he doesn't know what's happening on the backside. I think you're going to have to find some way to get some of these secondary blitzes home.
Is Donovan Wilson the best blitzer in the secondary?
I would say he's got the best chance for the feel of how to get home. Yes, I would say that. Him, I'm interested in Bland. I think Bland's but I think that Donovan Wilson is one of those where he's a see ball, hit ball guy.
Yeah.
And so if he sees ball in quarterback's hands, he's going to, you need to give good shots in the pocket there. If you can get those up, that'll be really, really key in this game.
When we talk about those secondary blitzes too, obviously there's nothing you can do about it. But is this a game like with that kind of an approach where you really miss Jordan Lewis? Like
Jordan
played physically, and he was a really good blitzer. And
Orlando Scandrick was really good too. Sometimes if you can cover up for the blitzer, because that ball's probably going to come to the hot side wherever that blitzer's coming from. But if you do it from the backside and you can kind of get some shots there, it might serve you well as you get going in this game.
Has there been enough attention paid, do you think, during the discourse? Because obviously there's been a lot of Brock Purdy. There's been a lot of Christian McCaffrey. We all know Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. I feel like there's been a kind of stunning lack of discussion about Ayuk.
Oh God,
yeah. You're not? Are you a fan?
I love him.
I think Ayuk is a guy that could. I feel like Cowboys fans may arrive on Sunday and just be like, "Man, I didn't hear much about this guy during the week.
No.
You're torching us." So, since you're an Ayuk fan as well, just give us a quick breakdown of how difficult he is.
What do you see from Ayuk when you watch him play?
I think Ayuk has completely leveled up this year. I think he's become a different receiver. Last year, I saw that there were some issues like catching the ball in contested areas. I remember that was an issue for him. He had taste drops. I think he's a tougher catcher this year. I think he attacks the ball better. But I really like Ayuk, and I think that he's just as terrifying, I think, to me as anybody else on this offense. He can definitely take advantage of some things in the Cowboys secondary.
As much as you love Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, I think Ayuk he's going to be a nightmare to have to deal with, because especially when they get around in the red zone, this guy, he gets lost in traffic. He finds space. He can make those Michael Gallup kind of toe dragging catches. He's super reliable. You're right. Last year, I think he had a little bit more problems catching the ball, but man, you have to know where that number 11 is at all times.
Yeah, he's just, especially with the questions in the secondary, I feel like you're obviously going to try and funnel a lot of attention to Diggs and things like that. And it could just be easy to, I'm not for the Cowboys, but I think it's easy for others to maybe forget, like, hey, Ayuk's pretty good.
He's real good. He's real good.
I'd take him over Michael Gallup. I'd rather have him here, to be honest. And so, that's the type of player that he is. What's the offensive approach? This is a game where Dak's going to have to win it, right? Like this feels like similar to Tampa last week. the game plan here is going to be you're going to have to win the game with the passing attack.
Yeah, I think that, to me, the running will come from Dak's scrambles that could, because this is in talking to some coaches around the league that have played the 49ers, their pass rush is not an organized one. And when I mean organized, it's always not disciplined when it's going up the field. So if you get guys, and the Cowboys have the same issue, that you get guys going up the field and all of a sudden the quarterback sees an alley and takes off running, then it could be a little bit of a problem there. They've got linebackers that can really, really tackle, though. But you got to find a way that if all of a sudden, see, the 49ers, from all these coaches again talking to, they don't want to play man coverage. They don't want to play man coverage. They want to keep everything in front of them and just tackle. But, somehow, some way you drop back, there's a rush, there's a lane, and Dak takes it. Dak can't hesitate running the ball. If you see a lane, go for it. 6-7 yards, not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. The crack toss stuff, the things like that, the running game, those are all going to be really good plays. But Dak running the ball himself, we've seen when Dak gets, and I talk about it a lot, when he gets muddied, bloodied, and he's got a big clump of grass in the side of his face mask, that's the best version of Dak Prescott. That's when you know that Dak is getting a feel of the game. And I feel like that's what's going to have to happen in this game. You block this front, you frustrate this front, you protect the front, and now you're going to make them have to blitz. When they blitz, that means they play man coverage. They don't want to play man coverage with this defense, not with the personnel that they have.
Is that when you knew the game was over on last Monday?
Yeah.
When Dak had the shoulder pad come out and he had the grass and he played the entire snap with his pad out. You're like, they got this in the bag.
When he had side of his body was grass stained and part of his pants and all that from sliding and diving, and that's what you need to see with Dak. Some quarterbacks, when they got grass stains all over, it's a bad thing. With Dak, it's kind of a good thing. It kind of brings out this. It's like David Banner, the Hulk. When all of a sudden he gets frustrated.
Bruce Banner, David Banner's the musician.
Okay, Bruce Banner, David Banner. But I was thinking of Banner, Bruce Banner.
Yeah. But you're good. You're good. I got it. I just knew there were some people laughing back home who were thinking of David Banner and Dak Prescott because
David Banner really is he a performer?
Yeah. He is.
For who?
I don't think that you would listen.
Oh, is that?
He's a rapper.
There was an actor. There was an actor named David.
David Banner's a rapper. I don't think you've listened to David Banner, but you probably he was in there somewhere. So, Brian, one last quick question before I get picks here. Is Dalton Schultz just as important in this game as CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah. Because the idea of the Cowboys is if you can kind of attack them in the zone coverage stuff, then they have to play the man coverage stuff. When they play the man coverage stuff, who will be on Schultz? Will it be one of the linebackers? Will it be Gibson, one of the safeties? Or will it be Hufanga? And the thing I know about Hufanga, if you watch him play against the Raiders, they matched up Waller on him a couple of times, and he couldn't handle it. So when you get those matchups that that you could take advantage of, you have to complete those passes. If you're Dak, you can't miss that ball when they're matched up with guys. So yeah, absolutely. Out of the slot, Jimmy Ward on Lamb, you got to take advantage of that too if you can. So there's some spots where you can clearly do some good against the secondary.
Do you think they're going to bracket him?
Schultz?
Not Schultz, Lamb.
I think the guy that they might take, because I asked one of these coaches.
Because Lamb did tell us after Tampa he expected to be bracketed by Tampa, and he was.
Yeah.
And said that he saw a bunch of that. So do you think – because Tampa did a decent job, removing Lamb from the passing game, but Dak shredded them everywhere else. So do you think San Francisco could approach it the same way? Just say, let's take him out this way?
Yeah, you would feel like that maybe Tampa's a little bit better in coverage than what San Francisco is. I could say I might be totally wrong about this. I'm just talking to these coaches that played against the Niners and like who to attack. To a man. I mean, I talked to 3 different coaches, and it was every one of them was like, "Listen, you block them, you can complete passes against them." And we saw that with Tampa. You block Tampa, Dak completed passes. So same thing can happen with the 49ers. It's going to be if it happens, you're going to see some success. And hopefully Dak doesn't throw the interceptions that we've seen before.
For picks for this game before we go to the mailbag, I think the Cowboys can absolutely win this game against the 49ers. I do think the 49ers are a better overall football team. There's not, when you watch them, there's not a lot of glaring weaknesses. They really don't have an area where it's like, man, this is a bad part of their team. They're very good. Dallas, I think, can compete with them and absolutely win this game. But I am going to take San Francisco on this one, just, with the benefits of the rest, being at home, everything else involved. So I've got the 49ers 27-24. But if they beat the 49ers, I think the Cowboys are in the Super Bowl because I think they'll beat the Giants or the Eagles the next week. Brian, what's your pick?
Yeah, I kind of feel like that I think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring game. I think both defenses, they both have great pass rushes. But you got offensive lines that could be up to the task. You got skilled playmakers. This game could be a Tony Pollard is better than Christian McCaffrey game. There's some really good matchups across the board. I have Dallas winning this football game 31-28. And I'm going to tell you this. I think it's going to be a Brett Maher field goal that's going to be the difference in this football game.
For those of you listening at home who may not have heard, out at practice on Thursday, Brett Maher made all 6 field goals when the media was out there. Win.
Yeah, and I was Friday morning, I was at the Star doing my work with DallasCowboys.com with Cowboy Break, and Brett Maher was out there with Overton, Holder. Everybody was out there, and they were working on field goals on the grass. And so, the practice squad kicker was over on the turf field. Viscano was on the turf field working by himself, but everybody was committed to being over. I don't think you're going to see I don't think you're going to see an elevation of the kicker. I just don't. I just don't. I think they're going to ride with Maher here. Everybody you're talking to, Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones, I think they're going to ride with him here, unless you know something completely different from me.
No, same thing I've heard. It sounded unlikely that Viscano was going to be elevated, and so that would leave you with Maher. But encouraging sign nonetheless at practice this week. You were listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, we got just a little bit of time for a brief mailbag now. I went too long on that second half there, Brian. I was just lost in a trance of the things you were saying, so I had to go along. First question here in the Dean Julia Love the Star mailbag. KMess22. How do you think the actives/inactives on D will work in this game? Similar to Tampa Bay, or could you see Wright or Gallimore or Bohanna on the game day roster Sunday? I think that the reason why you saw Gallimore and Bohanna inactive in part, other than just the bodies and everything, I don't think the Cowboys were worried about Tampa running the ball.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
I think they felt like they could stop them. So with San Francisco's ability to run the ball, I definitely think you could see one of those guys active. I don't know about Wright. It just kind of depends on – Dan Quinn's played the secondary rotation kind of close to the vest. It depends on how he wants to mix and match it. But I absolutely think I would absolutely expect Gallimore to be active. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think Gallimore would be the guy, even though they were we've kind of we're hearing all year long they were a little bit disappointed in him. But, at times he's played very well, and then other times he's disappeared. Bohanna, a lot of the same things that we're just talking about. I kind of wonder how they're going to handle Xavier Rhodes in this game. I think Xavier Rhodes, to me, would be a guy that I might consider playing if you got into the red zone. You know what I'm saying? I would consider maybe because I think the shorter the area, the shorter the field, it limits how far he has to run. So if you get into some tight situations, I would think that maybe we would see Xavier Rhodes, but on the other side, Bland, with and then Izzy as being those guys. I think Izzy deserves the opportunity to play in this football game. He showed up very well last week.
Next question from Mario, one of our loyal listeners. What's your best strategy / matchup at slowing Deebo Samuel? I'd like to see Donovan Wilson, one of our surest tacklers, follow him around the formation. It's very difficult. It's like how teams try to plan for Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
You put him anywhere, it's really tough to game plan. I don't know that you can just say follow Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. But Brian, what would your approach be with trying to slow down Deebo?
Bobby, I'm kind of one of these guys that I think I would just go ahead and play left and right corners. I don't know about traveling. The 49ers are going to try and make you adjust to their formations. And I mean, adjust in a way when they put Juszczyk out as a wide receiver, when they put McCaffrey out as a wide receiver, when they move Deebo Samuel into the box. I don't think you could get into that mode of like traveling with guys. Then all of a sudden they bring Deebo Samuel in as a running back. And now you got Diggs playing in the box or near the box and having to deal with the run. So if I'm Dan Quinn, I'm playing left and right corners and I'm matching it that way. I'm not letting them take Van Der Esch out of the box. I'm not letting them take Wilson out of the box. There's some things by alignment that you can do. Now, if they start wearing you out because you don't match well enough, I think this is going to be a lot of mixing and matching myself. But I think it's going to be a left and right and go from there.
Next question here from Bablis. Tell me why this offensive line will fare better than last year's offensive line, considering the injuries. Is the addition of Tyler Smith that transformative? Well, so in last year's game,
Connor Williams was bad.
Connor Williams was bad, and he was at left guard. Tyron was at left tackle. Lyle Collins was at right tackle. So you're talking about 3 positions being different this year, even though it's just 2 players that are different. But they looked good last week. And I get Tampa Bay does not have the same defensive line that San Francisco has and the ability to cause problems for you there. But I do think that this offensive line is in a better spot in terms of their physicality and their matchups and everything else to do a better job slowing San Francisco than they were in a position to do last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's going to be tough, but you just mentioned, they had Connor Williams had several penalties in the game. It was Mike McCarthy even brought it up. It was a weird game because of the down and distance stuff. It goes back to Bill Vinovich being your official. If the Cowboys are allowed to hold, if the 49ers are allowed to hold, this game could have a pretty high score, and I kind of feel like, though, Tyler Smith has done a really, really nice job. For him to play left guard and left tackle in that game and really not miss a beat, I think that says a lot about the kid.
Question from Ryan Zamboni. Why did Damone Clark get 0 snaps last week? Would you rather Barr or Clark get those snaps versus San Francisco? Clark, as you have talked about, Brian, there are times he still just looks kind of lost.
Yeah, I felt like with Leighton Van Der Esch back in the lineup that would help him, but he didn't get any snaps. It was really, and if the 49ers, again, all this movement and ball to the outside and perimeter runs and stuff like that, Clark or Barr, who do you trust? That's so. Clark can run. Barr's more savvy and and can see things faster, but can he close the ground? That's exactly
the question. What do you want? Do you want somebody who sees it better and maybe doesn't have the athleticism to get there anymore, or do you want the guy who is not seeing it well at all but has the athleticism to potentially catch up? It's with Van Der Esch in there, I think I'd probably prefer Clark.
Yeah.
That's what I think I'd prefer. And just hope that Leighton can do a lot to help him and direct him. But I think that the ability of Clark, we've seen a couple different times this year, even though Clark's been out of position, we've seen Clark make some really impressive chase down plays. Yeah. Like he's an incredible athlete. Right. And I think that You talking about Christian McCaffrey can score from 80 at any given moment. I think I'd like that speed on the field rather than Anthony Barr. But, that's just me. That does it for us here on the Love the Star podcast. We will hopefully talk to you again on Monday after a Cowboys victory and the first NFC Championship berth since Brian's days in the NFL, all the way back in January of 1996. It has been a long time. The Cowboys are very, very close, and they've got a real shot. But regardless, even if the season ends over the weekend, we will still be with you guys throughout the offseason. But fingers crossed. And until Monday, we will talk to you. What's up, Brian?
I've already looked about 80 players. So
you're way deep already on the draft.
I'm trying. I'm doing my best.
Whether the season ends or not, we got stuff to talk about. Plenty of it, you guys. Until Monday, we will talk to you guys again later.